There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from shouting matches or slammed doors. It comes quietly. It creeps in through dismissive comments, unspoken expectations, and the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful but suffocating. This is the emotional reality of many women married to a narcissistic husband, a reality that drains not just their spirit but their sense of self. When we think about pain in a relationship, many people imagine the big fights, the screaming, the betrayal, the obvious wounds. But with a narcissistic husband, the most devastating damage rarely comes from one dramatic moment. It comes from a series of small, calculated cuts. At first, it doesn't even feel like destruction. It feels like teasing or just a comment or a suggestion made in the name of love. He might say, "Why do you wear that? It doesn't really suit you." Or, "You're so sensitive, it was just a joke." And because those words don't come with fists or shouting, you brush them off. You tell yourself, maybe he's right. Maybe I am overreacting. But here's the truth. This is how erosion works. It's never one tidal wave that destroys the shoreline. It's the slow, relentless pull of the water, day after day, year after year, until the land you once stood on is unrecognizable. The erosion of self begins when she starts to question her worth. She wonders if she really is too emotional. She wonders if her friends notice her flaws as much as he points them out. She starts second-guessing her laughter, her opinions, even the way she moves in the world. What makes this so dangerous is that it doesn't happen overnight. If it did, she would see it for what it is. But because it's gradual, she adapts. Each time he criticizes her, she adjusts a little more. Each time he dismisses her feelings, she silences herself a little longer. Each time he makes her feel like she's not enough, she is harder to be better. And over time, she doesn't even notice that her reflection looks different. Not the one in the mirror, but the one inside, the reflection of who she believes she is. The vibrant, confident woman she once knew fades. In her place is someone hesitant, anxious, and desperate for approval. This erosion is not just emotional, it's spiritual. It robs her of the freedom to trust her instincts, the courage to speak her truth, and the joy of simply being herself without fear of criticism. She stops dancing to her own rhythm and starts marching to his demands. She stops creating, dreaming, laughing freely, because every part of her life has to pass through the filter of his approval. And the cruel irony is this: she often doesn't realize how much she's lost until one day she catches a glimpse of herself in an old photo, or she remembers how she used to feel in the presence of people who truly loved her. And it hits her. She's not the same woman anymore. That's the power of emotional erosion. It doesn't just change how she feels in the relationship. It changes how she sees herself in the world. It convinces her that her voice is too loud, her needs are too much, her love is too needy, and her presence is not enough. But here's the secret her husband doesn't want her to know. The woman she was has not been destroyed. She's still there. She may be buried under years of criticism and neglect, but she is waiting. And the moment she chooses to believe in her own worth again, the erosion stops. The tide begins to turn. And slowly, the shoreline of her true self begins to rebuild. If the slow erosion of self is the silent storm that wears a woman down, then gaslighting is the lightning strike that blinds her to reality. Gaslighting isn't just lying, it's not just denying, it's a deliberate reshaping of her truth until she can no longer tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And when you can't trust your own mind, you lose your anchor. You're left drifting in waters where only his version of reality seems safe to cling to. It often starts small, with a twisted memory or a denial of something obvious. She might say, "But you promised we'd go to dinner tonight," and he'll respond, "I never said that. You must be imagining things." She's left second-guessing herself. Did he? Did I mishear? Maybe I'm just forgetful. And each time she doubts her own memory, she hands him a little more power. Soon the confusion spreads beyond simple disagreements. It creeps into her emotions. When she cries because he insulted her, he insists, "You're too sensitive." When she's angry because he broke a promise, he tells her, "You're overreacting." And when she's suspicious because of his lies, he flips it on her, "You're paranoid." What happens is profound. She stops trusting her own emotions. She learns to apologize for feeling hurt. She learns to suppress anger because it's irrational. She learns to silence her intuition because, in his words, she's crazy. Gaslighting is not just manipulation, it's psychological warfare. It plants seeds of doubt that grow into vines, choking her ability to trust herself. And here's the most heartbreaking part. Over time, she may begin to rely on him to tell her what's real. Because when your memory, your emotions, and your intuition are constantly invalidated, you start to think maybe he's the stable one, maybe I'm the problem. That dependence is exactly what he wants. But let's be clear, gaslighting is not a reflection of her weakness. It's a testament to the strength of the tactic. Gaslighting works because it targets the most human part of us, our need for clarity, our desire for truth, our longing to feel understood. Imagine living in a house where the walls shift an inch every night. One day the window is a little lower, the next day the door feels narrower, the furniture moves ever so slightly. At first you think it's your imagination. But as the days go by, you start doubting everything. Your eyesight, your memory, your perception of the world. That's what living with gaslighting feels like. It's disorienting, it's exhausting, and it's terrifying. Eventually, she may stop voicing her concerns altogether because she knows they'll be twisted against her. Silence feels safer than speaking. And in that silence, her isolation deepens. But here's the truth he doesn't want her to see. Confusion is not clarity, doubt is not truth, and his denial does not erase her reality. The fact that she feels hurt is enough to validate her experience. The fact that she remembers differently is evidence that her truth exists. Breaking free from gaslighting requires one of the bravest acts a woman can take, trusting herself again. Believing that her memory matters, her emotions matter, and her perspective is not only valid, but vital. One of the most dangerous traps in a relationship with a narcissistic husband is that his control rarely looks like control in the beginning. It doesn't arrive with a heavy hand or locked doors. It arrives dressed as love. He says, "I just worry about you when you go out without me." It sounds protective, even caring. But underneath, it's a leash. He insists, "I only want what's best for you." Those words should bring comfort, but in his mouth, they carry judgment because what's best always seems to mean what he wants. He asks, "Why do you need them when you have me?" A question that sounds romantic at first, but slowly cuts her off from her family, her friends, her community. Control in a narcissistic marriage often hides behind one of the most painful forms of abuse in a narcissistic marriage doesn't come from the things he says. It comes from the things he refuses to give. Love, in its truest form, is meant to be freely offered. It is warmth, kindness, presence, and connection. But with a narcissistic husband, love becomes something else entirely. It becomes a transaction. Affection is never consistent. It is given like a paycheck, only when she has earned it. When she pleases him, when she complies, when she sacrifices her own needs to meet his, he rewards her with tenderness, with charm, with validation. But the moment she resists, questions, or asserts herself, he withdraws. The withdrawal is cold. It's not always in words. It's in silence, in distance, in the look that says, "You failed me." He might ignore her for hours, sometimes days. He might sleep on the edge of the bed without touching her. He might speak to her only in clipped, dismissive sentences, and she feels it, not just in her mind, but in her body. She feels the ache of being unseen. She feels the sting of being treated like she's invisible. The house feels colder, heavier when his affection is withheld. This is how he conditions her. She learns that her survival in the marriage depends on managing his moods. If she wants closeness, if she wants even the smallest crumbs of tenderness, she must bend, she must silence herself, she must anticipate his every need. Over time, she begins to live like a beggar at the table of love, grateful for scraps, grateful for the rare moments when he chooses to be kind, when he allows her to feel wanted. But that is not love. That is control. That is manipulation. That is the slow starvation of a soul. And the hunger it creates is unbearable. She knows she deserves better. On some level, she feels it. But because she is starved, even the tiniest offering of affection feels like a feast. And then the cycle tightens. Deprivation, compliance, reward, withdrawal. This cycle of emotional withholding doesn't just damage her. It reshapes her. She learns to tiptoe around him, to anticipate his silence, to measure her worth by the amount of affection he doles out. And the longer she lives this way, the more she forgets what it feels like to receive love that is steady, consistent, and unconditional. The tragedy is this: withholding teaches her that her needs are negotiable, that her feelings are too much, that love is something she must constantly chase. But here's the truth: love is not meant to be rationed. Love is not meant to be dangled like bait on a hook. Love is not a reward to be earned. It is a gift to be given freely. When he withholds, it says nothing about her worth. It says everything about his fear of intimacy, his hunger for control, his inability to love without conditions. The courage for her lies in recognizing that the emptiness she feels is not because she is unworthy. It is because he refuses to give. And once she sees that clearly, she can begin to seek love where it is given freely, consistently, and without games. One of the most exhausting, soul-crushing experiences of being married to a narcissistic husband is living on the emotional roller coaster he creates, the relentless cycle of idealization and devaluation. At first, she is placed on a pedestal so high it almost feels unreal. He showers her with affection, attention, and admiration. He tells her she's the most beautiful, the most special, the most irreplaceable woman he's ever known. He praises her laugh, her intelligence, her kindness. He convinces her that their love is extraordinary, something rare and sacred. This stage, the idealization, is intoxicating. It feels like the kind of love she's always dreamed of, the kind that makes her believe she's finally found her forever. And in those moments, it is nearly impossible to imagine that the same man could become her greatest source of pain. But then, without warning, the shift begins. The compliments turn into criticism. One of the most effective ways a narcissistic husband emotionally drains his wife is by cutting her off from the people and places that give her strength. And the cruelty is this: it rarely happens all at once. It happens quietly, subtly, almost invisibly, until one day she looks around and realizes that she is standing alone. At first, it seems harmless. He might say, "Why do you spend so much time with your friends? Don't you want to be with me?" It sounds romantic, even flattering, as if his love is so deep he can't bear to be apart from her. But soon the comments shift. "I don't really like how your friend talks about me," or "your family doesn't respect you the way I do." What he's really saying is, "I want you to choose me over them." And because she wants peace, because she doesn't want to argue, she begins to pull away from the people who matter most. She cancels lunch dates with friends. She skips family gatherings. She stops answering calls because she knows it will spark an argument if he hears the phone ringing. Over time, the circle around her grows smaller. What used to be a community becomes a handful of people she rarely sees. And eventually, she may find herself with no one left to turn to but him. That's exactly how he wants it, because the fewer voices she hears, the more his voice dominates. The fewer people she trusts, the more she depends on him for reality, for validation, for identity. Isolation is one of the most dangerous tools of emotional abuse because it doesn't just take away her support, it reshapes her world. Without friends to remind her who she is, without family to affirm her worth, without a community to give her perspective, she begins to believe his narrative. She starts to think, maybe I am the problem, maybe no one else would understand me, maybe no one else would want me. And here's the painful irony. Sometimes when she does try to reach out, the people around her don't recognize what's happening. To them, it might look like she's just busy or settling down. They don't see that the distance isn't her choice, it's his design. The longer this goes on, the more isolated she feels, even when surrounded by people. Loneliness creeps in, heavy and suffocating. She may even convince herself that leaning on others is weakness, that it's safer to keep everything to herself. But isolation is not safety. It is a trap. And the moment she realizes that connection is her lifeline, not her weakness, is the moment she begins to rebuild her strength. Because the truth is this: healing never happens in isolation. Healing happens in community, in the presence of people who see us, hear us, and remind us of who we are when we've forgotten. That's why the narcissistic husband works so hard to separate her from her people, because deep down, he knows that her strength is multiplied when she is supported, that her courage grows when she is loved, that her truth becomes clearer when she is mirrored by those who genuinely care. And so the path out of isolation is often the bravest one: reaching out again, picking up the phone, saying yes to the friend she pushed away, walking back into spaces where she is welcomed as her full self. Isolation is the enemy of freedom, but connection, real, loving, authentic connection, is the doorway back to life. If there's one thing a narcissistic husband almost never does, it's take responsibility for his own actions. Accountability feels like poison to him. So instead, he perfects the art of blame and projection, turning every conflict, every shortcoming, every mistake back onto his wife. It works like this: if he breaks a promise, suddenly she's the one who misunderstood. If he raises his voice, it's because she provoked him. If he lies, it's because she made him feel like he couldn't be honest. Every wrong has a scapegoat, and that scapegoat is her. And after enough of these conversations, she begins to carry weight that was never hers to hold. One of the most devastating effects of being married to a narcissistic husband is not always the shouting, the gaslighting, or even the blame. It is the quiet, creeping erosion of a woman's identity. Over time, she begins to lose sight of who she is apart from him. At first, she may enter the relationship with a strong sense of self, her passions, her dreams, her values, her quirks. She might love reading late into the night, listening to music that makes her heart come alive, or spending weekends with friends who lift her up. She has her own voice, her own light, her own compass, but slowly that changes. A narcissistic husband wants a wife who reflects him, not herself. Her interests are dismissed, her opinions belittled, her independence subtly undermined. If she voices her own thoughts, he finds ways to silence them. If she shows joy in something outside of him, he finds ways to mock it. If she tries to pursue her own path, he blocks it or criticizes it until she gives